So, hello everyone and welcome back to part 2 of the rebuild of this Gardner 2LW. We finished off the last video removing the cylinder block, so we'll get straight back into it and get the pistons off. So this is one of the two gudgeon pins out of the engine. It's in pretty good order, although you can see some marks which are the edge of the conrod piston and the oil groove in the little end bush that you can see in the middle. You can't feel any of it, and the pin actually marks and the pin actually measures up correctly across its length. There's 2/10 of diameter difference across the whole pin, so very good. However, it is quite sloppy in the little end bush, and having measured the little end bushes, it's going to need new bushes because the little end bushes are worn. Now we have the pistons out the way, we'll get the cam followers out. Looking pretty good on that one, so we'll take the rest out and take a look. Again, pretty good that one. And like I've said on the LXB videos, we'll be reprofiling these and the cam lobes themselves, so we don't need to mark up where they've come from, but we do need to keep the tappet and the body together. There we go, that's all the tappets out. Really good. They're certainly better than in the LXB we've just taken to pieces. Okay, so let's get the timing case cover off. So there we go, there's the cover off. A cast iron cover on this engine. Looks in pretty good condition. So same as the LXBs, each cylinder has its own separate cam lobe section, which is secured to the camshaft itself by these. There we go, that's the other one just come around, so I can undo that. This one, this side was a little bit loose. Okay, so with those undone, we are able to pull the camshaft out. So we'll get the timing chain off and then remove the camshaft. So the camshaft end bearing, this runs in a recess in the end cover. It's not too bad, little bit of play. We'll be replacing it anyway because we replace all of them throughout the engine anyway. But it's not too bad. Okay, so next job, being an LW, this will all more than likely have a split chain. The LXBs have a one-piece chain and you need to use a tool to split them, but this one will probably have, if it's the original chain, will probably have a split link in it. So let's see if we can find the split link. Yep, there it is. There's the split link. So we can remove that to split the chain. Now that isn't on later engines. Later engines will have a one-piece chain and you need to use a tool to push a pin out. So that's the securing clip removed. You can now slide the link out. The chain is not particularly tight, so that's the end plate. Now what we need to do is slide this back while being careful not to drop the segments that are in here. There's quite a lot of play in the timing chain side to side on this, so I think this engine's going to need a new timing chain. Okay, with the timing chain now removed, we'll see if we can get the camshaft out. Now it might be a bit tight, but we'll give it a go. Oh, no. Pretty good, this one. There's cylinder 2's lobes. Obviously we'll need to measure them to see whether there's any wear, but there's no nasty score marks in them. They look pretty good. And again, a bit like the LXB, you can see there's a bit of staining from the oil around the back. Now this isn't marks, you can't feel any of this. This is just build up of varnish. So we'll pull it out the rest of the way and get the other one out. And again, this one's looking pretty good. No nasty wear. Again, same as the LXB. This is the spacer that controls the end float of the camshaft. Okay, that's the cam removed. Looks pretty good. For those of you who've watched the LXB videos, you'll see these dark marks here are the areas that are exposed within the engine. In this area here would be where a bearing sits, and then the same here. This is where the collar would be that adjusts them, that controls the end float, and then that area there and that area there is where the camshaft lobe segments sit. In general, it's a bit grubby, but otherwise looks in pretty good condition. So with the timing chain out the way and the camshaft out the way, we'll take the water pump drive out and take a look at what the bearings are like in that. Okay. Okay, that's the water pump drive removed. Don't know if you can see that, but there is quite a bit of play in both bearings. They're not too bad, but again, as a matter of course, we replace these during rebuild, so we'll get that replaced. The gear on the end doesn't look too heavily worn, looks pretty good. There's a polished area, but not bad. Okay, so we'll move on. Okay, little bit of persuasion, but that's the crank nut undone. So we'll need to lift the engine out of the cradle before we can take the pulley off, but at least the nut's undone while it's all nice and stable. One of the idlers. This is the fixed idler. The other one has got a crank in it for tensioning the timing chain. Bit of play in the bearings, but again, as I said, the bearings in these will all get replaced anyway. And there we go. There's the housing for the idler removed. Again, bit grubby, but otherwise in good order. The bearings are really shot in this. So it's now time to remove the alternator or dynamo drive, depending on what's fitted. But I've made this hard for myself because I forgot to undo the nut before we took the timing chain out. So I'll have some fun getting the nut off, and then we have to drive the shaft out, and that will come out complete with the housing on the other side. Okay, so there's the shaft, complete with the key. Bearing's very worn in that. So definitely due replacement, that one. So that's one of the crankcase side plates removed. A bit dirty, but otherwise all good. So we'll remove the bolts out of the oil pump drive housing, this here, but we won't be able to remove this until the oil pump has been removed. So this nut here is seized onto the stud. I don't know whether it's cross-threaded or not, but it's trying to unscrew the whole stud. So we'll get the nut splitter out and cut the nut off. There you go. Nut split. Okay, well now the clutch is unbolted. We can't actually take it off while it's in its cradle because the cradle itself is in the way. So next job is to undo most of the sump bolts. We can't get to all of them because of the forward pulley and the forward engine feet. So we'll get most of the sump bolts out, lift the engine out of the cradle, take the flywheel and clutch off, take the forward feet and the crankshaft pulley off, and then we can get the sump removed from the engine and take a look in the bottom end. So looking at the clutch pressure plates, you can see there's quite a sizable divot in the end of the pin here. This is a point that one of the arms that operates the pressure plate pivots on, and this will have to be rectified when the clutch is off. So we'll get the pressure plate off and take a look at the friction plate inside. That really didn't want to come off over those studs, they're quite corroded. So this is the back face of the clutch assembly. There's quite a worn area there, but it's not too bad. So we'll get this refaced and that'll be fine. Then we have the clutch plate here. Not in horrendous condition. The only thing we will check is that this spline, how worn that is against where it mates onto the gearbox. The gearbox input gear is quite badly worn, so I expect this will be too. But other than that, this will get relined and go back in. Okay, with a bit of a struggle because I'm on my own today, the flywheel's off the engine. So we'll get the fasteners securing the sump on at this end undone, and then move round to the other end. Okay, that's the last remaining fasteners at this end undone. We'll just clean up some of this muck before we go much further, just makes it a bit nicer to work on. There we go, that's the worst of the gunge removed. So we'll move round to the other end of the engine to get the sump undone. Again, there's a bit more gunge to get rid of, so we'll get rid of that and then we can undo the sump mounting bolts across the forward end here. There we go, that's the end cover off. In here's the bearing race for the crankshaft nose bearing. Same design as on the later LXBs. So with that out of the way, we've got a couple of bolts here to go and then we can get the sump off. Okay, well with that undone, that's all the bolts and nuts that are securing the sump on. So we'll pick it up and get the sump off. And here we go, the sump is now removed. Generally not too grubby inside, there's a bit of sludge in the very bottom, but that's to be expected for an engine of this age. So we've got this off, and we now have the engine lead on its side. So we'll get the main gallery oil pipe work off and get the con rods out, and then we can turn the engine right upside down to take the crank out. Now, for those of you that have watched the LXB videos that we've done, this is a bit different here, the main gallery pipe work. On an LW like this, this main gallery oil pipe work is a single piece made of copper, well, soldered together. So unlike the LXBs where you can take each individual part to pieces and obviously get very clean inside, these are quite hard work to clean out properly. And there we go, that's the main gallery pipework off. Now, that takes a lot longer than it should, because, to be quite honest, quite a poor design choice. The placement of the fasteners means that you can't get a socket on them, and you can't even get a spanner on a few of them properly. So, not ideal, takes a while, but that's now off. So we'll get the con rods undone and take a look at the bearings and the journals. Then take the end cover off, and then it's time to get the crank out. So if you look at the carbon build up on the counterweights nuts and the main bearing nuts, and then the same on the connecting rod ones, I would say, a bit like the pistons and the block, that these con rods have been out at some point. Okay, so that's both of the connecting rods out. What we'll do is we'll get the crankcase upside down, get the end cover off and get the main bearings undone, and then we'll take a look at all of the bearings and journals once it's all out. Okay, so that's this side of the end housing undone. These top two are nuts and bolts, the rest of them are studs, so they'll still stay there. So we'll get the crankcase upside down, and I can undo the other side and take this off. There we go, that is the end casing all unbolted, so we can get this removed now. Now, with the end casing off, before we go any further, we'll check the end float on the crankshaft, see how that sits against the tolerance. Once we've done that, we'll get the main bearings undone. Okay, so we've got the clock gauge set up now. The crankshaft is fully pushed that way. So in metric measurements, because that's what this clock gauge is, the end float on one of these is 0.102 to 0.152 millimeters. So 4 to 6 thou in bananas. So we'll have a quick look what this one comes out at. Okay, so that is 0.13 millimeters, so it's within tolerance. So end float wise, this is okay. We'll just go back the other way just to check it goes back to 0, which it does. Okay, so we have sort of 0.13 millimeters of clearance for end float. So let's move on, get the main bearings undone. Okay, so that's the main bearing caps off. So we'll get the crank out. We can take a look at all the bearings, take a look at the crank, and see what we've got. Okay, so we now have the crank and all the bearings out of the crankcase of the engine. So that is the engine fully torn down. As we just checked, the end float on this crank was okay. But hopefully you'll be able to see on camera there are some marks in the big end journals which you can actually feel. So this here, there's a ridge in the middle of the journal there. and the same on this one. This one's slightly off to one side, but the other one is in line with the oil hole. This journal here, there's some ridges in it you can feel again at the centre area. And this one here is quite a few scores in it in places that you can feel. Now, we've already ran over the crank with a mic, and it's currently at standard size, so has not been reground in the past. But because of the marking and scoring on the journals, by the time that has been cleaned up, even with new standard size bearings, the tolerances will be too large. So this crank's going to need a grind and new bearings. Also, to add to that, the big end journals are actually tapered across the width of the journal, so that will need correcting as well. So that's all we've got time for in this video. We're going to take quite a bit of time cleaning all the components ready for it to start going back together again. But we hope you enjoyed the teardown and join us again soon. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.